Snow was coming down sideways off Lake Ontario, and Noelle sat with her back against the cold stone wall of the Alcott Hotel, watching her own breath curl up into the streetlight. She had learned, over the past 8 months, exactly how long she could sit still before the cold stopped being uncomfortable and started being dangerous. Tonight she had maybe 20 more minutes before she'd need to move. Inside, past the revolving brass doors, the woman who had once told Griffin Sutherland she couldn't build a future with a man who had nothing left to build with was about to marry someone else. Griffin didn't know that Noelle knew this. Noelle didn't know Griffin at all, not yet. She only knew the hotel because she'd slept 2 blocks from it for the better part of a year, in the loading dock behind a bakery that threw out day-old croissants around 11 every night. Griffin got out of the car first, and for a moment he just stood on the curb in the wet snow, adjusting the cuff of his coat with more care than the gesture required. It was the kind of thing a man did when he needed his hands to be busy so his face could stay still. Cameras were already clicking behind the rope line. Someone shouted his name. Someone else shouted Camille's, and asked if he had any comment on the wedding, on the timing of it, on whether it was true he'd bought his own table at the reception just to make a point. He didn't answer any of it. He looked past the reporters, past the gold-lit windows of the Alcott's Grand Hall, and for a second his jaw tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. 18 months ago, Griffin Sutherland had lost almost everything. Not slowly, not the way empires are supposed to fall, with warning signs and quarterly reports. It had happened in 9 days. A partner he trusted had walked away with the intellectual property that mattered most. 3 lenders had called their loans at once, and the business press in Toronto had run his photograph beside the word collapse so many times that he'd stopped reading his own name in print. Camille had sat across from him at dinner on the 9th day, in the restaurant where he'd proposed 2 years earlier, and told him, gently, she thought, kindly, she believed, that she simply couldn't see a future built on what remained of him. He had rebuilt, not loudly. He'd taken a smaller office on Adelaide Street with a leaking radiator and worked 18-hour days for a year and a half until the company that had once tried to bury him was quietly acquiring pieces of his new one instead. By the time the invitation to Camille's wedding arrived, an invitation he suspected her mother had insisted on, some old idea about grace and appearances, Griffin was worth more than he had ever been, and none of it had made the particular ache in his chest go away. He hadn't come tonight because he wanted Camille back. He'd come because some small, unfinished part of him needed her to look at him and understand that she had been wrong about what he was worth. That was when he saw the woman across the street. She was sitting very straight for someone sitting on frozen pavement, her coat. If it could be called that, it was more of a cardigan with nowhere left to go, pulled tight across her chest. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever had once held it back, and there was a stillness to her that made people's eyes slide past her, the way eyes slide past things they've decided not to see. A woman in a mink stole stepped around her without looking down. A man in a tuxedo glanced at his watch instead of at her. Griffin watched her for longer than he meant to. A security guard in the hotel's livery came out from under the awning, walking toward her with the particular briskness of a man who has been told to solve a problem quickly and quietly. "You can't be here," he said. "We've got VIPs arriving." "I'm not bothering anyone," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "You're bothering the entrance. Move it along." Griffin knew that tone. He'd heard it in boardrooms, dressed up in better language, people who wanted you gone and wanted to pretend they hadn't decided that yet. The guard reached for her arm, and something in Griffin simply moved before his mind caught up with it. He was already crossing Front Street. "Don't touch her." The guard stopped as if he'd walked into glass. There was nothing loud about the way Griffin said it, which was exactly why it worked. Up close, the woman looked even more exhausted than she had from across the street. Pale under the streetlight, her lips chapped, dark circles under eyes that were, Griffin thought, unusually striking. A deep hazel brown with a directness to them that didn't match the rest of her circumstances. There was a small dark birthmark just beside her nose, delicate as a comma, the kind of detail a person's face is built around. "Are you hungry?" he asked her. She blinked up at him, like kindness was the last thing she'd expected from a man in a $2,000 coat. "I'm fine, thank you." He didn't believe her, but he let it go. "What's your name?" She hesitated. The kind of pause that comes from a person who has learned that giving out information, even something as small as a name, rarely goes anywhere good. "Noel," she said finally. "Noel," he repeated it like he was testing the shape of it. "Come inside with me." She actually laughed, short and surprised. "I beg your pardon? To the wedding? You're not serious. I'm almost never anything else." She looked down at herself. The cardigan, the jeans gone thin at the knee, the runners that had stopped being waterproof 3 winters ago. "I look like this." Griffin glanced back at the hotel, where women in furs and men in tailored wool were filing through the doors under a canopy of white string lights, and then back at her. "You look like someone this city has badly underestimated." Something moved behind her eyes. She wanted to reject the words, he could see it, and at the same time some starved part of her needed them too much to let them go. He shrugged out of his coat and set it over her shoulders. It was heavy, still warm from his body, and she pulled it closed at the collar the way a person handles something they're afraid might be taken back. "Shall we?" he said, offering his arm. "You actually mean to walk me in there like this?" "Yes, they'll stare, let them," he said. "Why are you doing this?" He held her gaze. "Because nobody should be freezing on a sidewalk while a room full of warm people pretend not to notice." It wasn't romantic. It was, she thought, the truest thing anyone had said to her in longer than she wanted to count. She took his arm. The ballroom of the Alcott was the kind of room built specifically to make ordinary people feel like they didn't belong in it. Soaring windows looking out over the harbor, chandeliers the size of small cars, round tables dressed in ivory linen and stacked with white peonies flown in from somewhere warmer than Toronto in January. The room quieted the moment Griffin walked in. Everyone in it knew who he was, knew the shape of his fall and the speed of his return. Then, within a few seconds, the attention shifted entirely to Noelle. She was still in her own worn clothes underneath his coat. Her hair was loose, and the extravagant room did nothing to soften how tired she looked. If anything, it sharpened it, the way a bright light shows every crack in old paint. But she didn't shrink. She kept her spine straight beside Griffin, her hand steady on his arm even though he could feel, faintly, that it wasn't steady at all. Whispers moved through the crowd like a draft. Did he actually bring someone off the street? Is that his coat she's wearing? What is he thinking? Noelle heard every word of it. Her fingers tightened. "Don't put your head down," Griffin murmured. "They're laughing at me." "No," he said. "They're showing you exactly who they are." She swallowed and kept her chin level. He led her to a seat near the front, and Camille's mother, a woman with the posture of someone who had spent 40 years perfecting disapproval, looked Noelle up and down with open distaste. "Griffin," she said, "what exactly is this supposed to be?" If you've been enjoying the story so far, this is usually the part where I'd ask you to hit that like button and maybe subscribe if you're new here. It genuinely helps us keep telling these stories, and I'm grateful for every one of you who does. Okay, back to it. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about love that survives hardship, about choosing someone even when the ground shifts under both of you. And Griffin sat very still while every line landed somewhere old and unhealed. At the front, Camille stood beside Trent Sorensen, the man who had once been Griffin's closest friend before he'd quietly, patiently, positioned himself to inherit everything Griffin lost. And her eyes kept drifting, not to her groom, but to the front row. During the vows, Trent took Camille's hand and said something about giving her a life without limits. Griffin's fingers tightened against his knee, almost involuntarily, and Noelle noticed. "Did she hurt you that badly?" she whispered. He didn't know why he told her the truth. "Yes, then don't let her see it," Noelle said. "That's the only kind of getting even that's ever worth having." He looked at her for a long moment, something in him quietly rearranging itself. He had brought her here, thinking she would be a prop in some private point he needed to make. Instead, this woman who'd walked in off a frozen sidewalk was steadying him. At the reception, the whispering didn't stop. A man at a nearby table made a comment about Griffin's unusual companion, just loud enough to be heard, and Noelle looked down at the tablecloth. "Look at me," Griffin said. She did. "You don't owe them shame. You talk like you know what shame feels like. I do, he said. Mine just came in a nicer suit. That got a small smile out of her, the first one he'd seen. And it did something to him he wasn't ready to examine. Camille approached them a few minutes later, moving the way a woman moves when she spent her whole life being told beauty is a kind of currency. Griffin, she said with a smile arranged like furniture. I confess I didn't expect you to actually show up. You invited me? I did. I suppose I thought you'd decline. Her eyes moved to Noelle. And you've brought company. How lovely. What's your name, darling? Noelle. Just Noelle. Griffin's face changed. That's all she owes you. Camille laughed, a small, cold sound. Goodness, I'm only being friendly. No, Griffin said, and the word landed with weight. You're being cruel and calling it manners. The people nearby went quiet. Camille's smile stayed fixed but didn't reach her eyes anymore. She's got a lot of nerve showing up the way she did. Noelle finally looked up. And you've got a lot of emptiness for someone who has everything. Camille went very still. Do you have any idea who I am? Yes, Noelle said. You're the woman who left a good man the moment his life got difficult. Silence spread out from the table. Trent appeared at Camille's elbow, murmuring something about decorum, but Camille wasn't listening to him anymore. Griffin rose slowly. I came here tonight thinking I wanted you to feel something, he told Camille. I thought I wanted you uncomfortable. But I was wrong. Were you? Camille said flatly. Yes, because I found a woman outside being treated like she had no value at all. And in the space of one evening, she's shown more grace than almost anyone in this room. I know what it's like to be abandoned, the moment things get hard. You taught me that. But I'm not going to let this room teach it to her too. Camille opened her mouth. Nothing came out. It was then that an older man made his way toward them, unhurried, a glass of champagne in one hand. Everyone at the Alcott who mattered in business knew Desmond Calloway. No, wait. Griffin greeted him warmly. Aldercott, he said, I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Life has a habit of putting us back in rooms we thought we'd finished with, the old man said, shaking Griffin's hand. He was the last true confidant of the city's old money, a retired financier who had once counseled some of Toronto's oldest families whose names had slowly faded out of the society pages, after tragedies nobody liked to discuss anymore. His gaze slid to Noelle, and his smile disappeared entirely. He lowered his glass. His eyes moved over her face, slowly, like he was trying to place a piece of music he hadn't heard in years. The shape of her jaw, the tiredness around her eyes, and then the small dark birthmark beside her nose. Something in him went a long way back. Back to a house on the bridle path. Back to smoke. Sir? Griffin said, is everything all right? Mr. Aldercott didn't answer right away. Noelle pulled Griffin's coat tighter around herself, suddenly unsettled. Is something wrong? Forgive me, the old man said finally, his voice unsteady. I didn't mean to stare. What's your name, child? Noelle? Noelle, what? Griffin's eyes narrowed. Why do you need to know? Please, Mr. Aldercott said. I need to know. Something about the pain in the old man's face frightened Noelle more than anger would have. Noelle Calder, she said quietly. The glass nearly slipped out of his hand. Calder, he whispered. The murmur around them died down as people noticed his expression. Noelle's heart began to race. Do you know my family? His eyes filled. Where are you from? I don't really know anymore, she admitted. My mother died when I was young. After the fire, I got moved around so much that eventually nobody kept track of where I'd come from. Mr. Aldercott's hand went to his mouth. The fire, he said. The Calder fire. 12 years ago out at the Muskoka property. Griffin turned sharply. What fire? We searched for you, the old man said, tears running openly down his face. For years we searched. After the fire, everyone believed you died too. You have her eyes, her face. Even the same mark beside your nose. Your mother had one in exactly the same place. Noelle shook her head. No, that's not. It is, he said gently. My child, your mother was the last living heir of the Calder family. Before she died, she left a trust in your name. A fortune that sat untouched for 12 years because everyone believed there was no one left to claim it. You were never forgotten by fate. You were only lost until the right moment found you. For the first time all night, nobody in the room was laughing at Noelle. Nobody whispered like she didn't belong. They watched her in total silence as the truth settled over the tables like snow. She looked at Griffin through tears. "You didn't know any of this?" "No," he said softly. "Nothing. Then why did you help me?" He held her gaze, and there was nothing performed in his face anymore. "Because you kept your dignity after everything the world had done to take it from you. I thought that was worth protecting, whoever you turned out to be," she cried then. Not loudly, but with the particular exhaustion of someone who has had to be strong for far too long without a break. Griffin stayed close, his hand steady against her back, while a few feet away, Camille watched the man she'd once discarded become exactly the kind of shelter she'd never once thought to build for anyone else. "Mr." Aldercott looked around the hall and saw the same guests who had mocked Noelle now watching her with something closer to shame. He'd known her mother, respected her, watched her give away more than most people in this room had ever earned. And now her daughter had walked in wearing a thin cardigan while people laughed behind champagne flutes. He turned to Griffin. "She shouldn't go back into that room like this." Noelle looked between them, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean your mother deserved to see her daughter honored properly, mister," Aldercott said. "And if she can't be here to do it herself, then let an old man who failed to find you sooner do it in her place." "I don't want to be turned into a spectacle," Noelle said. "You won't be," Griffin told her. "But you also don't have to let this room remember you only for the worst night of your life." Within the hour, Griffin slipped away and made a single phone call. He didn't announce it or explain himself to anyone. He simply spoke, low and direct, to a woman on King Street West who owed him more than one favor, and told her precisely what was needed. A gown. Deep emerald, he said, without hesitating, fitted through the bodice, hand-baited, with a long, soft train, unforgettable. He paid for it himself and said nothing to Noelle about it at all. He simply arranged it the way a person quietly brings an umbrella out ahead of the rain. Less than an hour later, a stylist arrived with a garment bag and gentle hands. Inside was the emerald gown, floor-length, curve-fitting, catching the ballroom light in a way that seemed to move even when she stood still. When the zipper was finally done up and the stylist stepped back, the dress didn't just fit Noelle's body. It revealed something that had been there all along. She stood in front of the mirror, speechless. She touched the birthmark beside her nose and whispered, "Is that really me?" Griffin, standing behind her, said quietly, "Yes, that's who you've always been." She noticed the tag still pinned inside the sleeve. Griffin's name written on the note beside the purchase. She held it for a moment, then set it down, smoothed the front of the dress, and walked to the door. When the doors opened again, nobody whispered. Noelle walked into the ballroom in the emerald gown, her steps unhurried, her chin lifted just enough to mean it. The light from the chandeliers caught every bead on the dress and scattered it softly across the room. But it wasn't the dress that silenced everyone. It was the way she carried herself. The same woman they'd mocked hours earlier, returning as someone they suddenly wished they'd treated differently the first time. Griffin stood the second he saw her. For a moment he forgot Camille, forgot Trent, forgot the entire reason he'd come to the Alcott that night. There was only Noelle. "You look beautiful," he said when she reached him. Her eyes filled. "It's too much." "No," he said, taking her hand. "For the first time tonight, they're finally seeing you properly." At the head table, Mr. Aldercott was invited to say a few words, and the hall went quiet the moment he rose. Everyone knew he wasn't a man who wasted them. He looked at Noelle for a long moment before he spoke. "I came here tonight prepared to give a polite toast," he began. "Life has given me something far more important to say instead." He turned fully to face her. "Years ago, I knew a woman from the Calder family. She was generous in a way people talk about far more often than they practice it. During the fire that took her home, her daughter was believed lost. For 12 years, we searched, we hoped, and eventually most of us grieved something we thought we'd never find." Noelle's hand trembled in Griffin's. "But tonight, Mr. Aldercott went on, his voice thick. "I looked across this room and saw her face again. The same eyes, the same mark beside her nose. Standing here is Noelle Calder, the daughter that fire was supposed to have taken from us." He lifted his glass. "To Noelle, not because of what her name is worth on paper, but because even when this city forgot her, she never once forgot who she was. And I am ashamed that some of us looked at her clothes tonight before we looked at her character." Gasps moved through the room. Camille's face had gone pale. Griffin began to clap first, and then, one by one, the guests rose to their feet until the hall was full of applause. Some of it moved, some of it, Griffin suspected, quietly ashamed of itself. Noelle could barely hear any of it. She only felt his hand around hers, warm and certain. When she turned to him, tears on her face, he pulled her gently into his arms. "You're safe," he told her. And then, in front of the room that had laughed at her only hours before, he kissed her. It wasn't for show, and it wasn't meant to wound Camille. It was soft, and it was protective, and it carried something in it Griffin hadn't expected to feel again after everything. For the rest of the night, Griffin stayed close to her, pulling out her chair, keeping a steady hand at her waist, answering for her when strangers approached with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, until she was ready to answer for herself. When the music started, he offered his hand. "Everyone's watching," she said. "Let them. I don't know how to dance in a dress like this. Then we'll go slow." And they did, under the chandeliers of the Alcott, Griffin holding her not like a man showing off something beautiful, but like a man holding something the world had nearly broken, and he had no intention of letting happen again. Across the room, Camille watched, and for the first time all evening, the diamonds at her throat felt cold against her skin. That night, Griffin took Noelle to his house up in Rosedale. Still in the emerald gown, her heart worn thin from everything the day had asked of it. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said. "Tell me everything about you, the real version." He looked at her for a long moment and kissed her, gently, honestly, full of things neither of them was ready to say out loud yet. After that they talked for hours. About his childhood, his collapse, the wounds Camille had left behind. About Noelle's years of moving from one temporary place to another. The nights she'd prayed someone, anyone, would remember her name. Before the sun came up, she fell asleep against his shoulder, and Griffin held her carefully, like a man who had finally found something worth protecting properly. If this story's landed with you at all, this is usually where I'd ask you to like the video and maybe leave a comment. It truly does help more than you'd think, and it lets me know which stories to bring you next. All right, let's finish this one. Months passed. Griffin proposed to her in the garden behind his house on a quiet spring evening. No cameras, no audience, no point left to prove to anyone. Their wedding took place in that same garden, small and unhurried, surrounded only by the people who actually mattered to either of them. No spectacle, no cold diamonds, just something steady and long overdue. Years later, that house was full of noise. Kids' boots by the door, mismatched mittens, the particular chaos of a Canadian winter lived indoors. Camille became something Griffin rarely thought of anymore. And Trent became a story people told as a warning rather than an example. Griffin and Noelle became proof of something simpler than either of them could have explained on the night they met. That real love doesn't rescue a person's dignity for them. It recognizes it was there all along, and once it does, it doesn't let go.